Guess what? It's recording.
recording.
All right. Wow, that's something. Now we know. That probably won't happen again, but it probably will, to be honest with you. All right, so we're talking Reconstruction, the time period after the Civil War. The book lists it as 1865, which is the year the war ended, to 1877, when the United States was literally and figuratively rebuilt. All right, so explore one, radical changes. And this is about what life was like for Southerners after the war. All right, so we got for the first question here. It says, in sum, the South had lost its main source of income and a great deal of its resources. So they lost income and they lost resources. I asked you to identify 3 of those, either loss of income or loss of resources. When I look at my answer, I had 4, but I wanted 3 from you. So 3 examples of things the South lost, either resources or income. Who can start us off? Julia, go ahead.
All of the Confederate money was now worthless?
Yeah. So during the war, the Confederacy created their own money, and people used it in the Confederacy. The war ends, the Confederacy loses, all of that money becomes worthless. They can't use it anymore. Add on top of that more money issues. The Confederate government had borrowed money from people and businesses. Those people and businesses were never going to be paid back. All right, that's good. So, literally like a loss of money. There's 3 more. What do you got? Madison, you got one?
The Confederacy and individual Confederate states had issued bonds to raise money to support the war.
Yeah, that's what I just said. Bonds are loans. So the Confederate government had borrowed money and had been loaned money by people, and they were never going to be paid back. Good. That's just a more complicated way of saying what I said. So other than loss of money, what else did they lose? Lily?
Farmers lost 4 million slaves?
Yeah, the number one resource the South lost was slave labor. I mean, it's horrible, slave labor, but the fact remains that it had been free labor that the South had experienced for generations, and that was gone. So we got loss of slave labor, we got loss of money, and then there's one more that I had hoped you guys would get. Julia?
Well, I said because the war was fought on Southern soil, many of the homes, businesses, and farms were destroyed.
Yeah, exactly. That's the second one I had. Thousands of homes, businesses, and farms were destroyed. Okay? And then the only one that I had that didn't come up was this one. Another resource lost by the South was people. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers died or were seriously injured. I've heard stories or read stories over the years where towns, like every single young person that went off to fight in the war, none of them came back. Like in towns lost entire groups of young men. Okay. So those were things that the South lost. Moving on. The next question, as you read it, says, what problems did African Americans face after the Civil War? But initially, and you can see it here, I had the question without problems in it. Just what did they face? And I did that because I wanted you to recognize that one thing African Americans faced was freedom. This is brand new to them. Slavery was abolished. They were no longer slaves, no longer property, couldn't be sold, couldn't be purchased. So they faced freedom. But they also faced problems. And I had 3 problems they faced, and I'm hoping you guys came up with some of those. Reese, can you give me one?
That they had no money or education, so
Yeah.
they weren't allowed it.
Yeah, you actually said a couple of the ones that I had separated. No land, no money, no possessions. Like nothing. And add on top of that, little or more likely, no education. What else? Did anyone have anything else? Yeah, what did you have, Madison?
I just said that they didn't. Oh, well, you actually put it there.
Okay. Julia?
I said they all needed jobs but didn't know how to do many besides the farm labor they had been doing before.
It's sad, good. It's sad, but this may be overly dramatic, but there would be instances where newly freed African Americans would like literally leave the plantation because they were no longer tied to it. They get out to the road, and what do they realize?
Can't go anywhere.
They don't have anything. So a lot of times they turn right back around because they needed a job and go back and work for their former owners. And in a sharecropping system, we haven't talked about sharecropping yet, but it's not a good system. It was not a good situation to work in. Okay, so before Lincoln met his end, he did have a plan for Reconstruction, and it was a moderate plan because he was a moderate. Who can give me a definition for moderate? Thank you, Madison. A definition for moderate?
A moderate is someone who avoids extremes and makes limited demands.
Speaking of moderates, the individuals that visited the U.S. Capitol yesterday, moderates, everyone shake their head and say no, no, not moderates, okay? So if you remember, Lincoln was a Republican and a moderate. Why did moderate, this is one of the more difficult questions, but why did moderate Republicans support Lincoln's plan? What about it did they support? Yeah, Lily, what do you got?
They supported that it would bring states back to the Union.
Yes. See if you can remember this. I'm going to simplify it. When Lincoln looked at a plan for after the Civil War and how to deal with the South, Lincoln wanted to hug it out. Lincoln wanted to like forgive and forget quickly to get the country back together. So moderate Republicans supported his plan for Reconstruction because they and Lincoln wanted the former Confederate states to get back into the Union quickly. They weren't interested in punishing. They were interested in saying, welcome back. Let's hug it out and move on. You follow that? Yeah. Okay. Because that differs from some other Republicans at the time. Lincoln was a Republican. He was a moderate. He favored like getting the Confederate states back into the Union quickly. Let's flip it. What's a radical? Can someone give me a definition for radical, please? Someone new would be great. Yeah, Jamie.
Someone who fights for extreme change.
Yes. Were there people visiting the U.S. Capitol yesterday that were looking for extreme change?
Yes.
Yes, they were. Okay. Why did these so-called radical Republicans, why were they against Lincoln's plan, Celia?
Because they thought it wasn't enough.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and also it was The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which I watched the same night, and that's why.
That and Black Hawk Down could not be more different movies. Oh my gosh. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Do you know about this?
No, never heard.
The guy ages backwards.
Yeah, he was born an old man, and then he became
He ages backwards. Black Hawk Down is about like military helicopters like crashing in like enemy area. Okay, so back to this. Why did radical Republicans oppose Lincoln's plan? Celia said it, because they thought Lincoln's plan didn't go far enough. They favored treating the former Confederates harshly. They wanted more punishment. Lincoln wanted to hug. His fellow Republicans, same party, but just the radical branch of it, wanted some punishment of the South. Okay? So, Lincoln had a plan. Can you tell me anything about Lincoln's plan for Reconstruction? Yeah, Madison, thank you.
The 10% plan was President Abraham Lincoln's plan to readmit the Confederate States back into the Union during the Civil War. Under this plan, when 10% of voters in the state had taken an oath swearing loyalty to the United States, that state could re-enter the Union.
Awesome. Well said. Is 10% a lot or no?
Nope.
So all he was requiring were 10% of the voters in these southern states that had seceded to pledge their loyalty. If you pledge to do something, what are you doing? Julia?
Promising.
You're promising. So they needed to promise to be loyal to the United States. Let that bounce around in your head a little bit. In order to get back into the Union, 10% of voters in, like, say, South Carolina had to promise to be loyal to the United States? Like, I don't know, raise your right hand and promise to be loyal. Have you ever promised to be loyal to the United States? Thank you very much. Almost every, if you say the pledge, that's a loyalty oath. We don't have to go down the whole Pledge of Allegiance road right now, but that's a separate conversation we could have. Okay, good. Good, Madison. Thank you. All right. What was one thing established during Reconstruction was the Freedmen's Bureau. Why was it established and what services did it provide? Looking for someone new to jump in. TJ, come on. What do you got? Freedmen's Bureau. Why and what? Like, why was it established? And what did it do?
My computer's broken again.
Okay. Yeah, Peyton, go ahead. No problem.
It was built as a welfare agency to help formerly enslaved people become full citizens.
Yeah. Do you have anything that they did?
They handed out food and clothing, they built schools and hospitals, and helped find missing family members.
Awesome. We pretty much mirror each other with our answers. So this was a organization established to help former slaves, and it gave out food and clothing, built schools, built hospitals, helped find missing family members. Okay, so radical Republicans in Congress were against Lincoln's plan for 3 reasons. Can you give me any of the 3 reasons why the radical Republicans opposed Lincoln's plan? Reese, get us started.
One of them was, like we said before, that the fellow was too easy for the former rebels.
Awesome. Not hard enough on the South. Too easy. Madison.
It didn't do enough to help the free people from slavery.
Nice. And lastly, Jamie.
They thought that it would lead to more much better reviews with too much restricted power.
Awesome. Great job, guys. You got all 3. Let's review. I think Reese said they opposed Lincoln's plan because it was too easy on former rebels. Madison, I think you said didn't do enough to help former slaves. Jamie, you said, and this is a big deal, it would give too much power to the former Confederate leaders. This is what happened, guys. The people in charge of the South before the war remained in charge after the war. Not a good scene. All right, speaking of not a good scene, I'm skipping the next question. I don't like it. My bad. Another tragedy. What happened on April 14th, 1865? Go ahead, TJ.
Abraham Lincoln was assassinated.
Yeah, by John Wilkes Booth. John Wilkes Booth, well-known actor, like known throughout the country, like a famous guy. Big-time Confederate supporter, big hater of Lincoln, shot and killed Lincoln at Ford's Theater.
What happened to him, like, after?
Who, Booth?
Yeah.
Oh, he was in a, did he get like killed in a barn?
Yeah, so they like tracked him down to a barn, and if I remember correctly, they burned the barn down.
Oh,
Glad he was in it?
Yeah.
I mean,
Again, I'm putting this online. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but that's what I remember. Jamie.
I'm pretty sure they're trying to like get him to evacuate.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
Some guy saw him and shot him, and they didn't really want him to shoot him so they could like investigate him or whatever to see why he did it. But the guy like shot him.
Oh, yeah, it would have been better to,
No.
I guess, get him alive.
But I guess like at the same time, if you were to like see someone who just assassinated the president, you wouldn't be like, oh, come here. You'd
That's-
just be like,
Well, if he was evacuating, you could at least like get him and like investigate. But if you just shot him, you can't ask.
But I think it's true that he was in a barn and they like set it on fire.
that's
Yeah.
horrifying.
It's a little bit horrifying.
He killed the president.
But still.
All right, moving on. All right, so many Southerners were unhappy with the changes brought by Reconstruction. Why? Why were they unhappy? Go ahead, Lily.
They resented being forced to live as legal and political equals with the people they had once regarded as private property.
Yeah. They resented being forced to live as equals with newly freed former slaves. And if you're going to hear anything in class today, I need it to be this. This resentment that many Southerners felt led to violence. And when I say violence, I mean the assault and murder of African Americans. The Civil War ended in 1865. For the next 100 years, let's just say until 1965, nice round number, thousands, not hundreds, thousands of African Americans were assaulted and murdered in the South. They also, the Southerners resented the fact that Northerners had like come to their area and that had moved to the South. Okay, so Lincoln dies. His vice president becomes president, Andrew Johnson. And as soon as he became president, many former Confederate leaders were elected to office. The people that were in charge before were in charge again. And these former Confederate leaders that were back in power, they passed black codes. What were black codes? Go ahead, Madison.
These were laws that made African Americans second-class citizens, and I have examples I can.
Yeah, please.
Should I say all of them? Or
Yeah, well, maybe three. If you got three, let's go with that.
Laws denying African Americans the right to vote, denying intermarrying between black and white people, and denying blacks to be able to serve on juries.
Yeah. One thing that I think you guys are all aware of and that was created by black codes is segregation. What's segregation? Celia, segregation.
Well, it's like being, like separating someone or something.
Yeah. And when we're talking this segregation, what is separated?
The black and white people.
Yeah, the races. They're separated by races. And if I say segregation, I'm pretty sure images pop into your head of examples of segregation. Like, what are you thinking of? We're talking separate stuff for blacks and whites. Madison.
I remember reading a book on segregation, and it was like this kid got beaten by a police officer for drinking the white people's water fountain.
Okay, so water fountains, bathrooms, restaurants, schools, hospitals. Yes. Neighborhoods, theaters, buses, trains, segregation. So segregation was legal in the United States for a long time. It no longer is. And then finally, and we'll stop with this, the two things that angered Northerners are things we just talked about. One, former Confederate leaders were back in power. We just fought a war. I wasn't there. I probably shouldn't say we. They had just fought a war. And think about this. Think about being the parent of a soldier that died in the North. And you knew your son went off to fight to get, to remove this certain group of people from power. The war's fought, your side wins, but those same people continue to be in power. That's going to drive people nuts. And the other thing they were angry at were the passage of black codes, which we just talked about. All right, so that wraps up 2.1, Unity and Division 1 through 4.